Nobody with more than 3 brain cells in their head can dispute that Tolkien did something truly incredible with The Lord of the Rings and the wider universe that is his legendarium. The world he made on the back of his musings with language has possibly had the largest impact on pop culture, probably more so than anything from even before his time. In the nerdier spheres, within which I count myself, obsessing over Dungeons & Dragons, Brandon Sanderson's latest works, or why on earth did Daenerys go off the rails in the final season of Game of Thrones, Tolkien's race of elves, dwarves, hobbits, goblins and orcs becomes something of a staple. Everybody knows that hobbits are quiet farmers, dwarves are miners and warriors, and elves are the grand race, beautiful and fair. A common point of discussion is the orcs and goblins, though. Are orcs evil? This question, particularly in the modern age where political correctness is king above all else, has been the source of a lot of heated debates. Many people have seen, to no fault of their own, a link between the description of orcs and the real peoples from North Africa and the Middle East. If this comparison is to be taken at face value, surely Tolkien was a blatant racist, describing his evil race as being similar to these real-world people groups. And by extension, how is it possible for an entire race to be wicked, evil beyond redemption? As my friend Lucille L. Blumier puts it, it is clear that Tolkien's perception of orcs as an allegory is not of any one race or peoples, but of evil. Orcs to him are in their very conception a representation of evil. Tolkien's orcs, particularly in his notes and letters, are corrupted peoples, not a race. The link with skin tone, I think, is irrelevant. Tolkien was a white English man. I believe he was among the greater men of his kind, but he still was not perfect. For a much better understanding of these points, please read Miss Blumier's blog post. Returning to the original point, are orcs evil? Tolkien certainly wanted them to be, and they serve their purpose in his writings, no matter what he ended up deciding. Problems arise in these aforementioned nerdy spheres of people, again, though I count myself amongst, when players want to be half-orcs or even pure orcs, and the options are there for them in official D&D materials. Life has taught us all that you cannot have your cake and eat it. Orcs cannot both be a rampaging force of evil and destruction and have morally acceptable individuals among their ranks who go on noble quests to save those in peril from deadly fire-breathing serpents. However, I would quite like to not only have my cake, but eat every last crumb, and this is how I did it. I am currently dipping my metaphorical toes into world-building, a process of crafting my own little universe to play God in, maybe with the purpose of a novel at the end of it. In this world building I wanted the classic races that everybody has come to know and love, elves, dwarves, etc. However, I found myself creatively restricted. I couldn't stick to the classic tropes, and still do something unique, so I tried to twist these races, make them better, in my own imagination at least. So far, I have worked my way through elves, all 3 factions of them, a winged race, and a tribal bestial race that lives in the jungle. When I came to orcs, and by association, half-orcs, I wanted to have the species that puts fear into the hearts of even the bravest soldiers, and still have the narrative fun of a group of people permanently associated with this evil species, without any of the issues with annoying political correctness. In situations where orcs bad, half-orcs good has been obvious, a particularly messy solution has been created to solve this problem. This quote-unquote solution has been used to explain the absence of female goblins in the anime show Goblin Slayer, and it does its job of defining goblins as truly evil. I want my orcs to be a cool sort of evil, like the stormtroopers of Star Wars. Cold, cruel, deadly, and simple. And adding the issue of the R word into my setting, and glorifying it for my cool evil race, was not something I was willing to do. While I was mulling this issue over, I had begun work designing my own half-orc race, partially based on my own plans for my half-orc character in my D&D group's game, Toothrob. I wanted this race to be a race of 2 broken halves, the savage, violent orc side, and the kind, creative human side. I guess I'd watched an Avengers movie or read about vampires around that time too, because the idea of the transformation between these states felt really cool to me. It still does. These half-dread, as I had now settled, would be haunted by the destructive power of their brutish evil forms and the damage they can do, and be voluntary exiles from human cultures to try and avoid any harm they can do to these unequipped towns. But the transformation didn't seem natural enough. What beast in nature can gain a foot or so in height, bulk up in ridiculous quantities, and change mental state in a matter of minutes? However, my setting was full of magic, and here is where I recover my cake after eating. Magic of this fictional world will obey whatever laws I lay out for it, so why couldn't there be an innate magic in these half-bred? Sure, that works as a very meta, it's all pretend anyway, who gives a monkeys approach, but it wasn't good enough for me. I needed a reason for the magic to be there. And then I had my idea. Half-dreads have the thinking power of humans, and the raw strength of full dreads. They are the perfect soldier, so perfect in fact, that maybe they were designed to be so, possibly to serve some dark evil wizard. Why not? In my world-building project, The Lands of Ark-Edva, dreads are truly animals, barely possessing thoughts, completely primal in their needs and desires. They have animalistic features, bare snouts, the tusks of a hog, simian paws and faces, thick coats of fur on most parts of their bodies. They fill this evil orc trope without the issues of also being people. They simply aren't people. So how do half-dread fit into this? They are what happens when you blend a terrible creature with a man. In the histories of Ark-Edva, a dark mage wished for the perfect army to lay waste to human society in the name of his god. In the dead of night, he snuck his way into both dread camps and human towns, stealing children, male and female, from both. In a display of a rare and dangerous magic, his dark mage would tear these children apart cell by cell and blend them into one, combining both man and dread, perfect soldier. After training these soldiers, he released them on the world. But he had failed. He underestimated the power of human nature. In their peaceful forms, these half-dreads had little desire to wage war on their hometowns, and they rebelled. This mage also underestimated the savagery of the dread, and when the warrior sides of his soldiers were used against him, there was little he could do. He was slaughtered by his own creation. Outcasts from both human and dread cultures, they created their own societies, started families, and became their own race in this world. And there we have it, my perfect orcs, savage animals with the most basic Neanderthalic concept of sentience, and yet I still have my perfect half-orcs, a tragic race stuck between the disgust of humans and their relative weakness when compared to the fully orcish. Best of all, I managed to do it without any confusing problems caused by a fully evil race or the other issue that comes from having them as true monsters and having half-orcs. I'm hoping to be able to do this with all the races of Ark-Edva, take a classic Tolkien-esque race and put a cool, interesting twist on it, satisfying my own, somewhat selfish need to have all the positives and none of the negatives. Historical events also prove very useful, it seems, when creating races, species, and groups, rather than relying on evolution and natural progression of places. It's far more interesting, for me at least.